Hey, this is Jared, and today we're going to be doing one of my new favorite things, worship reflections. Yep, it's a Monday. You know the drill. Let's get to it. All right, this one's a winner. We're geared up, ready to go. Yesterday was Sunday, October the 28th. Today is, of course, the 29th, and we are getting so close to Halloween. The plan is for the next couple days to be the end of October, means the end of VLOGtober. And so I hope you've had a lot of fun. I know I have. And it was a great learning experience. It was a great growth experience. I'm so happy for the new subscribers, the new people who we've joined into this tight-knit community. I love the comments, the conversations that are going on in some of these videos. So just keep it up. And if you haven't already, jump down in the comments right now and let me know what your favorite new I don't know what to call them, segment, what your new thing is. If it's daily devotionals, if it's these worship reflections on Monday, if it's the live streams on Saturdays, or if it's my thoughts on Wednesdays. What was your favorite thing that was new this Vlogtober? And then I'd like to start incorporating one of those things into my weekly routine. Maybe instead of doing one video a week, I can go to two in November and December. And then maybe in the future I'll go even beyond that. But for now, we're just trying to get to Halloween. Spooky! And it's going to be a lot of fun. So yesterday, Sunday, and we had a guest speaker come in. His name is Wesley Putnam, and it was really neat. A real neat guy. I got the chance to interact with him because I'm the music guy, and so I had to kind of coordinate with him a little bit on service stuff. And so got the chance to talk to him and see his heart, and just a real genuine person, really living on the Lord too. The way that he and his wife and his family operate is just really very, very reliant on God's supply, and almost missionary-like, except for they're in the U.S., right? It's such a neat thing to see them, and the way that they live their lives in total reliance on God. And so, I don't know, just really neat guy, and I cannot say that enough, especially because he's like a real musician. A lot of these folks come through and they're like folk musicians, you know what I'm talking about? But this guy was legit. And I think he's got a YouTube channel. Mostly what he does is Facebook Live videos, I think on Fridays or Thursdays. And so maybe I'll link him up in the description if you want to check him out. He didn't ask me to do this. I just genuinely think he's the real deal. Been doing it a long time. I don't know how long they said. Maybe, it's definitely over 20 years of being in a circuit of churches, just jumping church to church and providing special music and providing special sermons. I think he's ordained in the Methodist system, and so I don't know what to say. Just he's the real deal. Like, we heard him play, we heard him sing, and I had my wife and one of our friends also came to service with us, and they all said the same thing, right? Like, he's the real deal. It's very obvious just by the way that he plays, the way that he presents himself. And so it was just really neat. Like, they're both musicians, I'm a musician. Like, we can tell when somebody's faking it. So check him out if you want to see kind of what he does. His ministry is called the Master Storyteller. It's really neat. He goes through and takes on the persona of different Bible characters and tells their stories sometimes in a modern interpretation of those stories. Really cool. And like Gideon, Elijah, Daniel, the big ones, and some of the smaller ones stories also. But just really neat to see his heart, neat to see his ability, neat to see his ministry, but really, really cool. And so he provided the word this past Sunday, and his main, I guess, the thing that kept coming back over and over again was this idea of what do people ultimately need? What do we desire? What's the root of everything that we do? Why do we do things? And so we just got back to fundamentals of human nature and human psychology. And really what it boiled down to, and this is what my takeaway was, is these three things, right? The old standard, he might have been a Methodist, but this 3-section thing seems real Baptist to me. He said, he narrowed down what all humans need into these three things, right? A desire for impact in the world, to know that you made a difference. A desire for influence in the world, to know that somebody cares. And a desire to know that you can make it in the world. A purpose. And so those three things that you'll have legacy, that you'll have influence, and that you'll be able to accomplish what you have set out to do, or that God has called you to, is all that people really want in this life. At least that's what he said. And I thought that was really true. I mean, there was a lot of truth in what he was saying, and it rung very true for me in my listening and my understanding of the scripture that we rolled through. And so I guess in that, and if I'm being reflective, I think that drives a lot of what I do, and I wonder how much it drives what you do in your everyday life. Do you do things that purposefully go out of your way, especially for the first two, to make an impact or to create influence for yourself? To know that people care and to know that you're making a difference. Like, how many times the jobs that we picked, let's just go to, let's just go back to basics, like back to school, right? When you were growing up and you were fantasizing about what you would be when you were grown, how many of us picked jobs that we thought were those two things, that we would create influence, we would be very influential as people, and that would make a big impact, that would be for the benefit of many people, and that would win people over to whatever cause we were. How many of us said, I would love to be a doctor, I would love to be a veterinarian, I would love to be I don't know, what are some other professions? A policeman or a fireman. There are several different areas that I think we kind of gravitate towards, and they're all service-oriented mostly, right? That's the kind of things that we gravitate towards, and then how many of us continued that thought process and made global or universal decisions about our lives based on those same principles? So I became a musician because both I was good at it, so I felt like I could do number 3, I could make it. I was told I was good at it from a young age, and I think that was borne out in my ability and the performances that I did. I think it was not just instilled, but it was lived out. And so and also I had some very influential teachers along the way, music teachers. The ones that come to mind, right? Just shout out, right? Miss Pierce, Miss Sedberry, Miss Holly, Miss Peters, right? Those were my teachers, my music teachers in choir teachers only. I had band teachers along the way, Mr. Eccles, Mr. Moore, and I don't want to leave anybody out, right? And so there were so many people who, throughout the process, just gave a little, put a little into my self-esteem bank, and because of their influence on my life, like, I knew that there was influence there. I knew that there was impact there in being somebody who was a musician, a music teacher, a conductor, a choir director, a band director, whatever you want to call it. And so with that realization, I said, that's what I want to be. So that's exactly what I did. I went to school for that. I went to school as my undergrad was in church music. My graduate work was in choral conducting. And so I went hard after that vision of what I thought was high impact, high influence as far as a profession is concerned. Now, how many of us do those things today? right? How many of us, how many of you out there made those same decisions based on something that somebody said, maybe a teacher, maybe, I don't know, maybe a parent? There are so many people that we meet throughout our lives that just give a little bit. They put a little bit into our reserve, our self-esteem reserve, and they instill in us this ability to go out and make an impact and influence other people. Now, about the number 3 part, what happens if you don't know for sure that you can do something? Well, in the case of folks like Gideon in the Old Testament, there were clear signs that you cannot do it, which is where God comes in. There are moments, I think, that God picks, he only picks, it was so interesting, something that Wes said. He said something that was very true, that in the Bible, the great people of the Bible were all people who were completely incapable of doing the things that they were asked to do. Now, why is that? Think of David, the smallest, the youngest, not the strongest, like the weakest, right? He had brothers that were stronger, faster, bigger, older, more influential, but like God chose the littlest, the youngest, the most far behind. Now, why would he do that? In the case of Gideon, who I've referred to a couple times because it's fresh on my mind, because that's what Wes talked about, Gideon was, for all intents and purposes, a real coward. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. When he saw that the enemy was coming, he went and hid, right? That's where he went. He went and hid in a grain storage or something. Like, that's where he was buried when the invading horde start coming in. God calls upon the coward to lead one of the greatest military campaigns of all time. Even in that moment, Gideon asks several times for a sign from God, like over and over again. He cannot just take him at his word that this really truly is God. Like, it's the classic story of, he first asks for a sign, and then the angel shows him the sign and says, "Oh, okay, this is from God," because he puts the food on the rock, and and then the angel touches the rock with his staff. You know the story. And then later on, when he starts to see the odds that he's up against, he goes, "Oh, well, I want to make sure it's God a second time. Why don't we make I don't remember which order it was in. The grass is dry, the fleece is wet." Okay, and then that happens, and he goes, "Well, maybe that's something that could have happened to anyone, or something else could have happened, like somebody could have spilled something on it. Why don't we do the opposite tonight? That the grass is wet, the land is wet, and the fleece is dry. Let's try that, and then I'll know that it's you, God." And then God does it. He shows him the sign. "It's me. I am with you. You cannot lose." So why would God choose these unexceptional people? And it's because they know that they can't do it on their own. That was such a revelation to me, that God chooses these unexceptional people because sometimes exceptionalism gets in the way of God's purposes. It gets in the way. If you think you can do it by yourself, but you can't, I don't know. It's just a really interesting concept, and I was really, I guess, and so that's number 3, that you can do it. And sometimes it's only by the grace of God, only by God's help, that we can do anything in this life. Especially the big things, the things that are outside of our comfort zone, when we're called to missions, or when we're called to go and help, or when we're called. We're always called. Every day we're called to something. And if we believe ourselves to be too exceptional, then sometimes I think that gets in the way of God's calling in our lives. So my, I guess, takeaway from this is I've got to relearn my own limits and relearn God's limitlessness. And so if I can live into that truth that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, I can do everything that God calls me to because He is with me. If I can be like Gideon, who just believed in the end and was able to go after a 100,000 plus man army with just a handful of people, like there's no way, and I get none of the credit for it. God gets all of the credit. Like Gideon didn't take the credit for that one. Like it's very clear, like this isn't on him, this is on God. God was the one who secured this victory. So if I can start living into that truth, I think that's going to be, I don't know what else I'll need in this life. I think that if I can live into the truth that God has told me I'll make it with his help, then the impact and the influence will come. So I'd love to hear what your reflections were this week, or if you have any comments or something jumped out at you from what we talked about here today. But for now, happy VLOGtober, everybody, and go in peace.